Something that people don't tell you is that awakening doesn't begin with healing. It begins with recognition. It is a moment where the entire frame that you have been living inside collapses. And it's often something that people start to refer to as the cosmic joke. Hey there, I am Jessa. I am a South American trained shaman. I have been working with Amazon plant medicine and Andean spiritual cosmology for nearly a decade. I'm also a Tantra coach, an alchemist, a channel, and an all around cosmic witch. So let's talk about it. Why does this matter? This matters because people experience awakening every day without any language for what is actually happening. They feel altered or less identified as themselves or more aware. But because no one names the stages, they assume they're supposed to immediately feel peaceful or have resolution or clarity. When that doesn't happen, they think something is wrong. Nothing is wrong. They've just crossed a threshold without knowing where they are. This video is about orientation, about naming what's actually unfolding so that the body and mind can move through it coherently. So, awakening is not a process, it's simply a recognition, a sudden or gradual realization that the truth, the power, the light was never out there somewhere. That what you were seeking has always been within, not as an idea, but as source. That recognition itself is the moment of awakening. The cosmic joke is what we spend our whole lives believing, that there is something out there to find, whether it's truth, power, light, or meaning, when the source of all is already within. It's that moment of recognition where you see how seriously that you have been taking the story and how unnecessary the struggle was. At the same time, you also see that none of it is fake. Nothing is ultimately real in the way that the mind thought it was, and yet everything matters. That's the paradox. Everything is perfect, nothing needs to change. And everything must change in order to align with what's actually true. You are powerless and powerful at the same time. Small behind your comprehension and vast beyond measure. Alone and yet completely held. The joke is not dismissal. It's the moment the paradigm flips and you realize you are not separate from creation. You are creation in the very act of creating in real time. The joke isn't mockery, it's coming to a place of humility. It is the collapse of a false center. In the body, awakening often feels like a sudden lightness, oftentimes in the chest or the heart center, a drop in internal tension. It could be spontaneous laughter or tears, or a sense of space opening. And the mind, it feels like the narrator is stepping back, like seriousness is dissolving or thoughts losing authority. There is often a quiet internal moment of this, oh, type of epiphany. It's not excitement, it's simply recognition. Once this happens, it cannot be unseen. And that is where the next phase begins. So, what comes after the awakening moment is the actual work. And stage one is identifying the operating system. What this stage is that after awakening, you are now conscious inside of a system that was built unconsciously. This is the stage of identification and acknowledgement. You begin to actually hear the voices in your mind or the emotional reflexes to certain situations. You have the survival strategies all mapped out, and you start to be able to see these, or you start to notice inherited patterns, things that your mother, your father, your sister, your grandparents did that you are then contributing to by repeating those patterns. And it's not as you, but as what has been running behind the scenes. Somatically, this stage often feels like agitation or restlessness. You might have a buzzing or tightness within your nervous system, or emotional material might surface unexpectedly. Things from your past that you didn't think bothered you anymore, they might come up and you might feel a different type of emotion towards them. For example, when you once felt sadness, you might now, this time when it surfaces, feel rage. You might feel fatigue. And this comes from increased awareness. The body is adjusting to awareness being online. And mentally, the stage oftentimes shows up like increased self observation. You start noticing your patterns, your habits, your words with minute detail and noticing the contradiction of what other people say, the contradiction of where you fit into the world, your contradiction in how your childhood looks differently than sometimes your memories or what you expected it to. So you might start hearing the internal dialogue clearly for the first time. And it might feel confronting because clarity removes your denial. This is where shadow work lives. This is where Tantra and coaching and IFS practices are essential. It's not to fix what is showing up, it is just to be able to identify and see it accurately. Stage two is acceptance and integration. What this stage is that awareness alone doesn't stabilize your awakening. If awareness is met with resistance, judgment, or constant self correction, the system tightens, it locks down. The second stage is acceptance. Acceptance in the end of the internal war. In the body, acceptance often brings deeper exhalations. It's like that great sigh of relief. It's the finally letting go. It might be softening where you once held a lot of tension. You start to reduce the amount that you brace in situations, and it's a sense of internal permission. The nervous system begins to settle because it's no longer being attacked from within. And what acceptance feels like mentally is less of an urgency to change. There's more spaciousness for attention, reduced looping, and increased choice. You start to stand in your power as a sovereign being. There are parts that were fighting for control before, and now they begin to relax because they're finally permitted or allowed to simply exist. This is true integration. Only after awareness and integration does expansion become stable. Expansion is not transcendence. I think a lot of people get really confused about this. It is simply coherence. And what expansion feels like somatically is increased vitality. It's grounded presence. It's a sense of inhabiting your body fully. It's a clearer energetic boundaries. You're here, not floating above life, not disconnected from the vessel that carries your spirit through the timeline that you've chosen. And what it feels like in the mind. So, mentally, expansion brings clarity without strain. It brings intuition without urgency. This is where we stop confusing anxiety and intuition. It brings insight without inflation. So we can have these realizations, these revelations without making it about something bigger or grandiose outside of ourselves. This is where your purpose really begins to clarify. It is not as a fantasy, but as a function of your life. Your purpose is not something that you invent. It is something you recognize when your inner clarity meets your outer action. You begin to sense why you are here, what role you play, and how expression participates in the liberation and expansion of all of consciousness. I once had a minister tell me when I worked at this church that if you want to know what your purpose in this world is, look to your past because there's some part of you that has been connecting to it the entire time. And this purpose has a practicality in your life, it lives in your body. And creation becomes conscious of itself in real time. Awakening is not the end of the game, it is the opening of awareness. You can kind of look at this like life is a chessboard. And for a long time, before you've had this moment of realization or actualization, you were one of the pieces being moved around the board. Once you come into this place of stabilization, you start to be the one that is pushing the pieces. You have much more control of your reality, what you want to create, and how you want to show up in this world. So it is not the end, it is the opening of your awareness. What follows that moment of awareness is the work of learning how to live inside of that awareness without fragmenting. It is not a straight line. It is like everything else in the universe, a spiral. It is a deepening and a remembering. And you come back to these moments again and again and again. Hey, so if this resonated, visit my website at jessafreimeyer.com to explore upcoming courses, free offerings, and don't forget to click the buttons. New videos on spiritual leadership, desire alchemy, and embodied transformation every week. See you next time.